All right, let's get into some NFL. Some schedule leaks are coming out, the draft, and much, much more. The general manager, vice president of everything for the Philadelphia Eagles, Howie Roseman, spoke today. John McMullen was there, and Joe Douglas as well, so we'll get some nuggets on some of the things that were talked about there. We do know now the Eagles will open up, obviously, on Thursday night, like all Super Bowl champions do, but it will be Thursday night at home against the Atlanta Falcons. It was being hinted at that it might be the Vikings, but it will be the Falcons that will be in Philadelphia to kick off the NFL season, which, by the way, John, we go back to that game. That was a way better game than the Falcons game. Imagine if Julio Jones catches that ball.
Yeah, that was everything. That was a fourth down play. That was basically a walk-off play. If the Falcons convert, they're going to win the football game. And they didn't, and the Eagles win and go on to win the Super Bowl. So it's that close. It usually is in the NFL. You can always go back to a point in the playoffs, as impressive as the Eagles ended up being a week later against the Vikings and then in the Super Bowl. It was right there for the Atlanta Falcons. And the Eagles were kind of still feeling their way at the time and had shifted the offense a little bit. Remember, they had the bye week, and Nick Foles had struggled so mightily against Oakland and early against Dallas, and they completely revamped the offense for him, and he played well, but then he took off the next week. So it really was just that close.
Yeah, John, and that's who they'll play against the Falcons to start things off. And Howie Roseman spoke today a lot, but I just saw NFL.com ranking the list of the top general managers in football, and believe it or not, Howie Roseman has snuck into the top 3 there, coming in at number 3. It's amazing how winning the Super Bowl will change all the perception around the league of you.
Yeah, well, you think about where this organization was a couple of years ago. And remember the head coach, when everyone painted him as so ill-prepared and didn't understand, wasn't capable of being a head coach. He probably would have been ranked 30, 31, 32. Howie, when he came back off the sort of ping-ponging with Chip Kelly, he would have been rated down at 30 or 31 and 32. And a couple of years later, they got the Lombardi Trophy, and they can do no wrong. And as usual with most things in life, it was in between. We talked a lot on this show. I saw a lot of positives from Doug Peterson in his rookie season as a coach, despite the narrative. And I saw a lot of positives with Howie Roseman when he came back. And I think he learned a lot when he stepped back, and he looked in the mirror and kind of recognized some of his faults. And the guy who's come back has been a different general manager, even though he's the executive vice president of football operations. Essentially, he's a traditional GM, and it's worked tremendously for this organization.
So, John, has the perception around the league changed of Howie, or is it just the same? And is this like a chicken and egg thing? He got the QB, or did getting the QB then help change the perception of him?
Well, yeah, I think if you look at success, long-term success, for any organization in any era, it's got to do a lot with the quarterback. But how he got the quarterback, and it wasn't like it fell in his lap because they were just bad. He had to go up, and he had to figure out a way to go get them from 13 originally, and then I think it was 8, and then 2. So he did a lot of things to get the Eagles in the position to draft a player he targeted. And Carson Wentz, make no mistake, that's the player they wanted. It wasn't Wentz or Jared Goff, it was Carson Wentz. So you have to give him and his staff as well a lot of credit for identifying that player and doing everything possible it took to go up and get him, because not a lot of teams have the courage to do that kind of thing. So he deserves credit for that.
So, John, we know what the Matrix is. 1999, Keanu Reeves, Neo, Lawrence Fishburne, Morpheus. What the heck is the cohabitation matrix?
Yeah, it seems like the Eagles always coin those terms that have you chuckling. And that was the one today, the cohabitation matrix. Talking about the culture of the team. We've had emotional intelligence in the past, and now we have that. And basically what it is, as they explained, is they encourage everybody in the organization. Doesn't matter who it is, coach, scout, personnel person, somebody on the staff, somebody doing video, and the players themselves, if they have a history with a potential player the Eagles are thinking about bringing in, they kind of pick their brains and see if there'll be a fit for the locker room at the NovaCare complex. Because one of the big things about this team was the culture and its ability to take players and maybe that were headaches in other organizations and have them fit in seamlessly. And that's what they're calling it down there. It's the cohabitation matrix.
John McMullen's with us here on 97.3 ESPN. That place is hilarious. I want to go back to Roseman a little bit because he did speak today, and we talked about the list. He was ranked number 3 on that list. Bill Belichick, by the way, was number 1 on the list of the top general managers in the league. And, Howie has been criticized a lot by the fans here. I mean, his first tour of duty, we always talk about, we don't know we don't know how to judge that first tour of duty because everybody perceived that Andy did most of the player personnel shaping of the roster and all that thing, all of those things. But, would you consider him now because of that Super Bowl, more so the Super Bowl or the fact that he was able to maneuver to get Wentz or some of the contracts? Because he always was perceived to get these contracts done, right? And that's what he was always good at. But why now is the kind of the move or the one thing that puts him in the top of that general manager list? What do you think it is overall now that puts Howie near the top?
Well, obviously it's a success. But, yeah, I mean, remember – it's almost interesting, and I always talk about it, when you have that general manager tag, which he had, as you mentioned, when Andy Reid was here, and even when Chip Kelly was here for the first year. If you look at him, he wasn't really a general manager with all the power. And I always say, there's titles and then there's actual job descriptions. And you can be a general manager in this league and have that title, but the head coach has the real power in the organization. Now, Howie has the real power. This is Howie's team. And it has been his team since he came back from his year away when Chip Kelly seized control. So this is the first time where he's been completely in control, and you have a traditional setup with the GM putting together the roster and then handing it to the coach, and then it's the coach's job to maximize the players he's been given. And basically the off season is for Howie Roseman and the in season is for Doug Peterson. It's worked perfectly. It's the first time in a long time. That's the way this organization has been set up. And, the ultimate test is longevity. It always is. But if you're looking for the one linchpin, which turned his reputation around, it would be the double move to go up and get Carson Wentz. There's no question about it.
Yeah, I mean, he was 42-38 in 5 years as the GM with 2 playoff appearances, no wins that was from 2010 until he was kind of thrown to the broom closet there. So 42-38, very mediocre, 5 years, 2 playoffs, and then he regained power December 30th of 2015, and over that tenure, the Eagles are 20-12 with an NFC East and Super Bowl championship. And I guess that is enough to put him in the top 5, number 3 on the list of the top GMs. Now let's talk a little bit about what the GM talked about today. And he talked about the difference of pick 32 and 33, which we have talked about here. But he said there are certain positions that a fifth-year option is a great value, and that there are other positions where you look at and question, would you rather have a 4th year and do a long-term deal? So it sounds like Howie is indicating that they're very willing to move out of that spot.
Yeah, and I was the one who asked him that question, and that's you kind of got to go about it in these types of things because they're so general at this stage of the game. We're a week out from the draft. I also had, to give you an example, I asked Joe Douglas, basically what are the deeper positions in this draft? He wouldn't even answer that. He wouldn't even say, well, running backs deep, interior offensive line, a lot of good players. No, I mean, that's how deep they are into the subterfuge. So I tried to go at it in a different way, and I said the difference between 33 and 32, which is that 5th-year option, and how that makes it a desirable spot for teams to potentially move up. It always is. It has been historically. And how we mentioned, it's the position. And as I wrote on 97.3ESPN.com, it's both positions. It's the position in the draft, the number 32, as I said, the difference from 33, and also the position of the player. And specifically, obviously, most obvious would be quarterback, because that's the one position where if you can pick a kid at 32 that turns into a star quarterback, to have that extra 5th-year option is such a value as far as moving forward, to have that extra year of control. Whereas other positions, to be honest, we talked a lot about running back. That's a position you don't want to pay a lot of money to. And that 5th-year spike is not nearly as exciting at that particular position. So it's going to be interesting. But I think it's pretty clear if you read the tea leaves, unless the Eagles love a player at 32, and I don't think it's going to be a running back, they're going backwards. And just because of the value of the position, as we say all the time.
And, John, you're right that they're always open for business, right? Even though he's kind of answering your question very analytically of who they might do in the 4th year and the 5th year and what kind of deals they look at. That for sale sign is always there, like willing to talk, willing to wheel and deal. Please come on in.
Yeah, well, I mean, let's be honest. All you got to do is look at Howie's history. He loves to move and he loves to make trades, and it's not only in the draft but also with players in season. In the preseason, and he said this is not. He even mentioned this is not the end of sort of the adding talent period. There are other ways to do it. There's still free agency. And the Eagles added LeGarrette Blount after the draft last year. They added Corey Graham in August. Obviously, they traded for Jay Ajayi at the deadline. So he's always thinking about making moves. But traditionally, and we mentioned it with Wentz, he's more apt to go up. But he just doesn't have the ammunition to do it this time without a 2nd and 3rd round pick. So I think you have to be analytical about it. If the Eagles are forced to, Joe Douglas said today he'll be happy to forego the 2nd day, but I think it's pretty obvious they want to get involved and they want to get more picks.
Yeah, for as long as I can remember, at least when the draft became an event and people were watching it in groups, when the Eagles would trade down, that's a normal response of fans booing. But in this case, do you think that winning the Super Bowl, what the front office has done, Howie Executive of the Year, Joe Douglas working closely with them, that buys them some equity or time with the fan base if they do move down?
Well, I never underestimate the impatience of fans because it can turn on a dime. In the minute they got the Super Bowl, People were thinking about number 2. So I think there's going to be some natural disappointment, to be honest, if you sit through hours and hours of the draft. Remember, the Eagles are dead last on Thursday night, and you sit through hours and hours and hours, and then they trade out, and there's no pick. I think there's going to be some impatience and some moaning and groaning. But I think to the more educated of the fan base, I think they understand that this is a very good team. They understand that this draft is probably 20 to 25 deep as far as legitimate first-round talents. So it's common sense if one of those guys doesn't fall to you and you have the ability to pick up extra picks and move down a couple spots and get the player you want anyway, well, that's smart way to go about it.
John, it's a little out of left field, but I was at the Flyers game last night. The subject of the draft came up. One of the gentlemen at the table was a Giants fan, and I said, do you think they're going to go quarterback or running back? And he goes, they need a damn lineman. Get him a big offensive lineman. And he was screaming that. Which way do you think the Giants are going to go?
Well, I talked about it a lot. I think ultimately Dave Gettleman spoke today as well. I was reading some of his comments. I think because of the position they're in, number 2 overall, because of the age and the declining of play, Eli Manning, I think they have to take the quarterback. But they could also trade out, especially if Buffalo is desperate to get that quarterback and do kind of an Eagles move. They've already moved up once, and they could move up again. If they really love Josh Allen and they want to get him at number 2 overall, then all of a sudden the Giants can be in a position to do some different things. But yeah, I'll tell you what, and I've told Mike this a lot, Quentin Nelson's the best player in this draft, the best football player. And it's almost ridiculous to talk about an offensive guard going number 2 overall. But of every player in this draft, the one guy who I can guarantee you is talking here today, and I encourage everybody to tape this, that's going to be a star in this league, it's Quentin Nelson. So I don't know if you can say that's a bad pick.
Well, he did indicate that, Gettleman, that is, that drafting a quarterback or drafting the wrong quarterback could set you back 5 years.
Yeah, that's, he's an old school guy, and that's the conventional thinking. I don't think that's necessarily the case any longer because everything's been shortened in the modern NFL. We always talk about contracts. Generally, the way they're structured is 1 or 2 years. The theory behind a quarterback, if you take a quarterback at number 2 and you really push the issue, even though you've known you've made a mistake, that's where that 5-year period comes in. And for years and years and years, people, when they pick a quarterback that highly, they want him to succeed, obviously, and they won't admit they made a mistake. If you get a kid and you admit you made a mistake, then it's a 2 or 3 year mistake. But if you don't, yeah, then it could kill you for half a decade.
Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. Check out John's stuff today on the website regarding his sit-down with both Howie Roseman and Joe Douglas. They both met with the media today. We've got a ton of Eagles coverage right now on 97.3 ESPN.com. John, take care, pal.
Hey, thank you, guys.